Your podcast can have 1 million downloads, but if you don't do anything with your podcast listeners, like you don't tell them where to go, you don't tell them how you can work with them, you don't tell them what the next steps are to getting more into your world, it doesn't matter. You're not going to convert your listeners into any clients. And that's just the truth. I know so many people that just say, I need more podcast listeners. I need more downloads. And that's going to solve my lead flow problem. But that's not the case. In this episode, I'm telling you exactly what you can do to make your podcast listeners turn into paying clients. Welcome back to another Espresso Shot episode of Podcast Café. These are quick hits of strategy to help you grow your podcast in the ways that actually matter. We're talking all about how many podcast listeners do you actually need to make clients? Now, of course, that's all vanity metrics. That's what they're called. The amount of podcast listeners you have is vanity metrics. The amount of Instagram followers you have is vanity metrics. That doesn't matter. You can have 10 podcast listeners, and if they're all 10 of the right people, you can get 10 clients from that. Of course, the more downloads you have, the more opportunities you have to attract the right people and actually sell to them. So that is one benefit of having 1 million downloads, right? That's 1 million people listening. But I know so many people that get 30, 40, 50 downloads and they just say, it's not enough. It's not worth doing. Imagine if you had 50 people in your room right now. Imagine if you have 50 people in your house. That is a lot of people. And that's who's listening to your podcast. And if you set yourself up for success and you actually tell your listeners how they can work with you, I guarantee you will be signing clients. I help podcasters with their strategy. And what I see time and time again is they come to me, they say, Haley, no one is actually signing up for my programs, my offers. No one is joining my newsletter. No one's following me on Instagram. And I listen to their shows and I do a full audit and I notice they're not telling their listeners to actually go do that. And that is a huge, huge missed opportunity. Because the truth is, when you have funnels set up in your podcast, you will see the results. That's what people are looking for. A podcast is a free resource for your audience to come and learn more about you, to gain trust, to get excited about whatever it is you're talking about. Basically, it's authority building for you, and they're getting the benefit because they're the listeners learning from you. If someone wanted to completely redo their podcast and have it in a way that was actually making them money through client acquisition, they could just listen to my podcast episodes and do it. Because I give it all away for free here. Now, people want it personalized, and that's why they come and do strategy sessions with me. That's when they come and learn directly from me. And just because I'm giving it all away doesn't mean no one signs up, right? I get clients for my podcast all the time, and it's because I'm having this as a place of education, trust building, and I'm telling you how we can work together throughout. Not in a too much a salesy way, right? I'm not going to come on here and be like, this is how you work with me, blah, 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 blah. But instead, more of, here's the education. And if you're interested, here's how I can help. And that's the approach you should also take with your podcast. So to dive deeper into that, I mentioned the importance of having podcast funnels. So you might be thinking, what the heck is a podcast funnel? Good question. A podcast funnel is basically, we're going to go through 2 examples here. Example 1 is your podcast is top of funnel marketing, which means your podcast is the first place that people see you. It's basically, they're not following you on Instagram. They have never heard of your name before. And they find your podcast, they listen to episodes. The next step in the funnel is bringing them somewhere closer, such as your Instagram or LinkedIn, such as your newsletter. That's a great next step for a lot of podcast listeners. Then after that, it's getting even more intimate, getting them on a call, sending them, actually connecting with them, talking to them. And then the next step is the client acquisition part. So that's a funnel. Now, let's say you have a podcast with great SEO, people find you all the time. There's really no surprise, like you're getting new listens weekly. A great example of this is Daylene Higgins. She has the podcast Wealthy After 40. That is such good SEO. People come across her podcast all the time and listen, and that's their first impression of her. A lot of money coaches or financial advisors have this sort of top of funnel approach because their podcast is the way that they get introduced to new people. So imagine new people are listening every single week and you're talking about money and they are learning from you. They're having some wins. They're going to want to know more about you. They're going to want to figure out how to learn even more from you because what you're teaching works. You have great podcast episodes. They want to dive in deeper. Now, if you don't tell them where to come and connect with you, if you don't tell them about your awesome newsletter, if you don't tell them about that amazing free resource that you have that all you have to do is put in your email and it'll be sent to you, if you don't tell them about that, how are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to know that you're active on Instagram and share money tips all the time? How are they supposed to know every week on LinkedIn you put out a new article about, money stats in the US for XYZ? How are they supposed to know? Okay, they're not. They're actually not going to know. So in your podcast, even if you're talking to 5 people, those 5 people need to know where else they can go. Okay, now let's think of this in the middle of funnel marketing. So this is what my podcast is. Typically, I'm not acquiring new listeners on a weekly basis from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, those sort of places. Most of the people that are listening to the show have met me in some way. They're following me on Instagram. They're following me on LinkedIn. They come across my website. They know of what I do and who I am. Then this podcast is like a trust building place. And I honestly think, okay, as listeners, tell me what industry you're in, send me a message on Instagram or LinkedIn, and I can tell you if your podcast should be top of marketing or top of funnel or middle of funnel. But a large handful of podcasts that I work with are middle of funnel, interestingly enough. So people have heard of us before, and the podcast is a place for them to get to know us more, learn from us more, and this is where we can build the trust. So I see this a lot with like business coaches where there's a bunch of business coaches out there and people have been burned by a coach here and there before, so they want to invest in the right person. So they come across you on Instagram. They see you have a podcast. They're going to listen to so many episodes of that podcast before they actually hire you because they're trying to trust you. They're like, is this the right person for my business? That's what middle of funnel means. So when that is happening, how are you actually going to build that trust? Ways to do this are asking people to come and ask you questions. Ways to do this are giving them that amazing free resource that has really transformed your client's business or your own business. A great way to do this is telling client success stories on your podcast. So see how the approach is different from top of funnel to middle of funnel? This is why it's so important to know this. Because again, if your podcast is middle of funnel and then you have 5 people listening, those 5 people, that goal is for them to trust you because they already know how to get in touch with you. Now, we need to convince them to hire you. So that's a different approach there. Now, of course, I do have to say this. A lot of podcasters will jump the gun with this. They will put out a few episodes, whether it's top or middle of funnel, and not get clients right away and get really frustrated with why is it not happening? And what I have to say to that is consistency is number one. You have to put out a lot of content on podcasts because podcast is like a long term, it's a long game. And of course, I'm not going to deny the bigger the audience, the more people will know about you and be able to come hire you. I'm not saying that we should not strive for more downloads. I'm just saying that whether you have 1 million or whether you have 10, if you're not treating them in a way that actually pushes them along the funnel, whatever it is, you're really missing out on a lot of opportunities and you're leaving money on the table. A great episode to go listen to is with my client Jen Coffey, where her podcast is the Phoenix podcast. She has a huge following online. So of course, and she's been well known on TV for a long time. So of course, when she launched her podcast, sales came quickly. But if you're just starting your business, you are building up an audience, it might be a little bit slower, but that doesn't mean to stop. That means to keep going, keep pushing, and the right audience will come. So this was a good little episode for podcast strategy, not podcast marketing, not podcast production episodes, not podcast scripting, whatever it is. This episode is really the foundational pieces to having a podcast for your business. If you're just having a podcast for fun, do whatever you want. But if you want business growth from your podcast, this is what you do. I hope you found this valuable. Again, message me on LinkedIn or Instagram and let me know which type of podcast you have, if it's top of funnel, middle of funnel, or if you don't know, just send me a DM. My links are in the show notes. And I will catch you tomorrow with another guest episode and back every single Wednesday with Espresso Shot episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the Podcast Café. I hope you're leaving with fresh ideas and inspiration to take your podcast to the next level. Remember, podcasting is a journey and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way. Let's connect. Be sure you follow me on Instagram at Espresso Podcast Production or visit espressopodcastproduction.com for more tips, resources, and behind-the-scenes insights. I'd love to hear about your podcasting journey. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more podcasters just like you find the show. Until next time, grab your coffee, keep creating, and I'll see you back here in the Podcast Cafe.